It hit like a punch to the gut. Loren and Alexei, the couple millions believed were the franchise's final proof that love could survive the chaos, are reportedly over. No hints, no drama, no mess. And then suddenly, divorce? Fans didn't even get the courtesy of a build-up. Just a quiet wave of rumors, a few missing ring photos, and now everything people thought was real feels like a lie. Because this wasn't just another pair bickering for screen time, this was Loren and Alexei, the last one standing. The couple who made it through international paperwork, homesickness, 3 pregnancies, postpartum anxiety, and a televised birth plan, all without ever becoming a punchline or a tabloid headline. They were the emotional safe zone of the entire series. The only ones viewers didn't have to brace themselves for. The ones you could point to and say, see, this show can work. But that's the part that stings the most. Because if they didn't make it, what hope is left for any of the others still holding on by a thread? Viewers didn't just admire Loren and Alexei, they emotionally invested in them. When other couples were screaming, scheming, or ghosting each other from opposite time zones, Loren and Alexei were quietly making sandwiches, raising toddlers, and surviving the grind. They didn't need fireworks. They were the slow burn proof that maybe, just maybe, love could survive all this exposure. When fans invest their belief in someone else's stability, any crack feels personal. They weren't flashy, but they were solid. And that's why this hurts differently. Because in a franchise built on chaos, they were the only couple that felt human, relatable, grounded. People trusted them like you trust the couple next door that always shows up to school pickups on time and still laughs at each other's jokes. No cheating scandals, no threats of abandonment, no social media breakdowns. Which is exactly why this silence is so loud. No public screaming match, no statement post, not even a staged apology or a reunion confrontation, just a growing digital absence. And the feeling that maybe things were crumbling long before anyone noticed. So if everything looked stable on screen, what wasn't being shown? What didn't make the cut in all those perfect family moments? Because the internet thinks the first quiet crack came in 2023, and it had nothing to do with infidelity or money. It had everything to do with Loren's body, and the decision she made that Alexei reportedly wasn't ready for. There's a difference between being happy and being branded as happy, and somewhere along the way, Loren and Alexei stopped being a couple and became a concept. Their love story didn't just evolve naturally over time, it was packaged, posted, polished, sold. Every milestone turned into content. Every cute parenting moment turned into a reel. From matching outfits to coordinated family photo shoots, they didn't just live their life. They curated it, and the audience ate it up. When everyone else in the 90-day universe was melting down in messy love triangles or financial scams, Loren and Alexei showed up with stroller reviews, bedtime routines, and baby bump updates. The narrative wasn't chaos. It was calm. But calm can be its own kind of cage. Because once you're branded as the stable ones, any sign of mess feels like betrayal. You're not just living your life anymore. You're maintaining an image. So every minor disagreement becomes a liability. Every annoyed glance, every tired sigh, every eye roll in the background of an Instagram story gets decoded like it's a hidden message. The pressure isn't just to be okay, it's to be endlessly okay. And that's a trap no one talks about. When you're the couple that never fights, you don't get permission to be frustrated. You don't get to grow separately. You don't get to say, I need space. Because people expect perfection, and you've already sold it to them. When the world puts you on a pedestal, it stops feeling like support and starts feeling like surveillance. That doesn't mean Loren and Alexei were faking it. Some couples are genuinely calm, and some relationships are quiet and private by nature. Not every peaceful exterior hides dysfunction. But when peace becomes performance, there's no room for real adjustment. No time to reevaluate what works and what doesn't. And no safe space to say out loud, maybe we want different things now. Because the minute that truth gets spoken, the whole brand collapses. So maybe the issue was never about fights or betrayal or big emotional outbursts. Maybe the issue was more invisible. Alignment. Two people drifting in opposite directions while still smiling for the camera. And the first place that misalignment showed up, it wasn't a scandal. It wasn't an argument. It was one personal decision, one moment of bodily autonomy that quietly clashed with years of unspoken expectations. That's where the story changes shape. When Loren chose something for herself, and Alexei didn't know how to sit with it. On the surface, it looked like a standard influencer milestone. Loren, after giving birth to 3 children in quick succession, decided to undergo a mommy makeover in 2023. She shared the process publicly, posted updates with raw honesty, and framed it as a personal decision to reclaim her body and confidence after years of pregnancy, breastfeeding, and postpartum changes. Fans cheered. Many saw it as empowering. But what most people missed, what slipped through the cracks between filtered selfies and swelling updates, was Alexei's expression every time the topic came up. Hesitant. Guarded. Quietly off balance. Not angry. Not controlling. But not aligned. Because for Loren, it was healing. For Alexei, it felt like loss. His discomfort wasn't rage, and it wasn't rooted in cruelty. It was rooted in fear. Fear that she was becoming someone new. Fear that this new version of Loren might not fit the picture they had built together. And when fear mixes with love, the reaction isn't always logical. Sometimes it comes out as a joke that stings, or a silence that cuts deeper than yelling ever could. And that's where the real fracture started, not in the decision itself, but in the emotional mismatch that followed it. When someone changes for themselves, the real test is whether their partner feels safe enough to adjust with them. Alexei never publicly condemned Loren's choice. In fact, he showed up, drove her to appointments, checked in on recovery. But support is not the same as agreement, and agreement is not the same as understanding. There's a version of love that tries to keep things as they are, even when they're no longer working. And sometimes that version comes from a protective place, a cultural place, a fear of losing the version of someone you first fell in love with. It's easy to frame Loren's decision as a personal win. And it was. But in relationships, personal wins carry shared weight. The body is hers, but the emotional adjustment belongs to both. And if this one moment created tension, quiet, respectful, but unmistakably present, what happens when that kind of friction keeps multiplying? When every future decision about career, identity, movement starts to clash with what the other person assumed would stay the same, the surgery wasn't the rupture. It was the first unmissable sign. The moment Loren acted on a vision of herself that no longer waited for approval. And the ripple that followed is where the dynamic between them stopped being equal and started feeling like a tug of war. The next shift would come fast, not about body, but about visibility. Because Loren's career wasn't slowing down. And Alexei? He was already retreating from the spotlight. There was a time when they moved in sync. Same home, same rhythm, same goals. But somewhere between baby number 2 and the next brand partnership, Loren's world started expanding, and Alexei started shrinking by comparison. What began as simple social posts about motherhood turned into a full-blown influencer career, complete with filming commitments, press interviews, and deals that relied on visibility. Her audience grew. Her confidence sharpened. Her schedule filled up with meetings, product drops, and on-camera days. And Alexei? He wasn't chasing that. He never was. He started pulling back, quietly. Less active online, less present in the spotlight, more grounded in routines that didn't need cameras to validate them. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't sabotage. It was mismatch. And in long relationships, mismatch isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent drift. Loren's brand became her job. Alexei didn't criticize it, but he didn't join it either. They stopped overlapping. He showed up for the big things, sure, the family milestones, the expected couple appearances, but the smaller day-to-day glimmers that used to define their rhythm started disappearing. He wasn't in every post. He wasn't engaging on every update. And fans noticed. Some blamed him for being distant. Others blamed Loren for becoming too public. But the truth is more boring and more painful. They were no longer growing at the same pace. When one person grows fast and the other stays steady, the whole relationship starts to wobble. Still, that doesn't mean either one was wrong. Wanting a quieter life isn't a flaw. Choosing a public career isn't selfish. Privacy isn't control, and visibility isn't disrespect. But when those preferences collide, the friction becomes constant. Scheduling becomes negotiation. Travel becomes compromise. Even dinner becomes a decision. Is this a family night or a brand post? And over time, even small questions like that start to sting. They weren't fighting on Instagram. There was no public blowout. But it became obvious that their days no longer looked the same, and their goals no longer pointed in the same direction. Alexei wasn't chasing followers. Loren wasn't retreating from attention. And the tension wasn't about love. It was about pace. About who adapts and who resists. And the harder it became to stay emotionally aligned, the more parenting exposed the cracks they didn't have time to fix. Because when you're raising 3 kids under 5, every delay, every disagreement, every silence gets amplified into exhaustion. And that's when cracks stop being cracks and start becoming collapse. 3 children under 5 is not a phase, it's a storm. It's diapers and tantrums and midnight feedings stacked on top of deadlines, schedules, and a marriage that barely gets time to breathe. The days blur into logistics. Who's picking up who? Who's doing drop-off? Who's dealing with the meltdown in the grocery store while pretending to keep it together? There's no space, no silence, no margin for emotional recovery. And inside that chaos, Loren and Alexei kept showing up. They filmed. They smiled. They posted family trips. They looked like they had it handled. But behind those sweet clips of stroller walks and toddler giggles was a grind that doesn't care how much love you started with. Because the love doesn't die overnight. It gets buried. Under bottle warmers, preschool forms, and the 4th night in a row of broken sleep. Conversations shift from dreams to logistics. From connection to coverage. It's not, how are you feeling? It's, did you pack the snacks? And in those in-between moments, when no one's watching, when no camera is rolling, that's where distance starts to grow. Not out of malice, out of depletion. Exhaustion doesn't scream. It erodes. And when you're that tired, every comment sounds sharper. Every silence feels colder. And even kindness starts to feel like another task to manage. You can be on the same team and still feel miles apart. To be clear, Loren and Alexei never abandoned the ship. They worked like a unit. They took turns, they coordinated chaos, they made decisions together. The public version still looked united. There was no obvious split in how they parented. And that's what made the emotional shift harder to spot. Because emotional distance doesn't always show up in fights, it shows up in absence. In the way one person stops asking about the other's inner world. In how a moment that used to be shared becomes something quietly endured alone. That's when fans started noticing it. The spark that used to pop in interviews dulled. The laughter felt rehearsed. The couple moments that used to feel casual started looking curated. Loren's posts became more centered on her solo journey, her recovery, her brand, her energy. Alexei's expressions started reading as checked out. Not angry, not hostile, just somewhere else. Like part of him had already left the room. And the people who'd once believed this couple could survive anything started asking the question they never thought they'd have to. What happened to them? When Loren's captions got shorter and Alexei's smile faded in photos, it didn't take long for fans to start the postmortem. Not on the show, but in comment threads, private Facebook groups, and Reddit pages titled things like, "What's going on with Loren and Alexei?" They weren't just reacting, they were investigating. Screenshotting eye rolls, rewatching clips in slow motion, comparing the way he used to hold her hand versus how he did in the last tell-all. Suddenly, a silence between sentences meant emotional detachment. A missed anniversary post meant disaster. A photo without a ring? Full-blown crisis. The audience wasn't waiting for answers, they were building their own. And this isn't new. Surveillance culture is baked into reality TV now. Fans don't just consume the story, they co-write it, sometimes more aggressively than the cast themselves. Parasocial relationships make people feel like they know these couples, like they've earned emotional access through years of watching diaper changes, visa interviews, and hospital visits. So when those couples change, evolve, or even collapse, fans grieve it like a personal betrayal. They don't ask what's going on, they declare what went wrong. They assign blame. They pick sides. And all of that unfolds while the actual couple, the real people in the marriage, are still trying to figure it out privately. When a relationship becomes public property, the pressure to stay intact becomes unbearable. To be fair, not every viewer is digging for dirt. Many genuinely care. They've seen Loren share about postpartum anxiety, witnessed Alexei's quieter presence during tough transitions, and rooted for the family through every baby announcement. Those viewers want peace for the kids. They want emotional safety for both parents. But even well-meaning speculation becomes weight when you're already stretched thin. Because it's not just the public split that breaks people down, it's the expectation to explain it, justify it, narrate it while living through it. And here's the deeper twist. The franchise itself relies on couples like Loren and Alexei. They were the proof that the experiment works, that cross-cultural love could last, that not every storyline had to be explosive to be meaningful. So when they start slipping, when their public bond starts looking less certain, it doesn't just affect their brand, it sends ripples through the entire system. Because for every chaotic couple the show promotes, it always needed one calm success story to balance the scale. And now that balance looks like it's cracking. They weren't just a couple, they were a guarantee. Loren and Alexei weren't brought up in the franchise to stir chaos, they were there to anchor it. When the others were throwing wine or ghosting each other at airports, Loren and Alexei gave the producers something priceless: stability. Proof. The long-term payoff for all the emotional roller coasters viewers had endured. You could watch the drama of the other couples knowing that somewhere, quietly in the background, there was one pair who had figured it out. Their marriage became more than a relationship. It was the franchise's warranty. It told the audience, if you stick around through the mess, love still has a chance. And that wasn't accidental. The show leaned into it. Happy updates, baby milestones, wholesome clips edited between explosive scenes. Loren's delivery room was aired between screaming matches. Alexei's quiet parenting moments played after breakups and blow-ups. They were used to reset the tone, remind you this wasn't all dysfunction. But that's the bait-and-switch reality TV always runs. It offers emotional security through people who never agreed to carry that load. Because Loren and Alexei weren't actors. They weren't paid to be symbolic. They were a real couple with real lives, and every time the show used their piece to balance the brand, it asked them to hold more than their own marriage. It asked them to hold the viewer's faith. When your relationship becomes the emotional cushion for a franchise, you're no longer just living it, you're performing it. And yes, there were benefits. Exposure led to income, opportunities, independence, brand partnerships, community. Loren's voice reached women dealing with postpartum anxiety. Alexei became a symbol of supportive fatherhood. They built careers off what the show gave them. But it came with a price. That price was the expectation to keep performing health, even when things were unraveling. To keep smiling, while the weight of public expectation grew heavier with every episode. And now, that smile is gone. Not in one explosive moment, but in the silence that followed it. That's where the shift happened. When the story stopped being about a marriage quietly ending and started being about a system that quietly demanded they keep going. And the first real proof that something had broken? It didn't come in a fight. It came in the decision they never announced. The choice to stop showing what no longer felt real. The divorce wasn't a scene, it was an omission. And that omission is exactly where we go next. No press release, no joint statement, no tell-all confrontation for the cameras, just a slow fade. Fewer posts, more silence, subtle shifts in captions, and then it started. One outlet reported a quiet, mutual separation. No drama, no scandal, just an end that slipped into the conversation like it had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Fans didn't know how to process it. There was no betrayal to condemn, no villain to blame, no explosive moment to anchor the grief. And that's exactly what made it harder. Because this wasn't a show. It was a real decision made off camera. After years of slow erosion that didn't scream, it sighed. And for some couples, that's how it ends. Not in rage, but in stillness. After months, maybe years, of doing everything right and still feeling like something's off. It doesn't look like breaking. It looks like disengaging. Conversations dry up. Intimacy becomes routine. Moments that used to feel shared now pass by in parallel. And the idea of staying doesn't hurt, but it doesn't feel alive anymore either. So instead of one big betrayal, there's just quiet retreat, a growing distance no one wants to name out loud. Until one day, staying feels heavier than leaving. Some marriages end not because of what someone did, but because of who they've quietly stopped being together. This doesn't make Loren and Alexei's separation a failure. It makes it human. Not every divorce is a crisis. Sometimes, it's a decision made by two people who loved each other fiercely and still couldn't make the math work after years of shifting roles, ambitions, and exhaustion. It's not always about drama, it's sometimes about clarity. About knowing that what you're modeling for your children, what you're holding on to for appearances, no longer reflects the love you started with. But even the quietest endings leave noise behind. There's debris that doesn't show up in headlines. Grief that lingers in places like routines, memories, and the smell of someone's old hoodie on the couch. Loren and Alexei didn't implode. They unraveled. And the people left trying to make sense of it aren't fans. They're three small kids whose lives were built on the structure of a unit that no longer exists. Because while the love might have shifted, the responsibility didn't. And now, the center of this story moves, away from the couple and toward the children who never signed up for the weight of a public love story breaking apart. It's easy to forget how loud divorce can be for kids, even when the adults are whispering. Loren and Alexei haven't stopped showing up for their children. That part of the picture hasn't changed. The co-parenting posts still exist. The family moments still appear, but now with a different emotional temperature, less intimate, more deliberate. It's not about pretending anymore. It's about preserving. Making sure the children feel stability in the middle of a structure that quietly split in half. Because once the marriage ends, the family doesn't disappear. It has to be rebuilt, redefined, made livable in a new shape. And that rebuilding process doesn't get televised. It happens off-screen, during drop-offs, bedtime routines, and holidays, negotiated through gritted smiles and quiet texts. That's what people often miss. They want clarity, they want transparency, they want to know what went wrong. But for these three kids, the goal isn't a public explanation. It's emotional safety. So even when Loren and Alexei continue to appear together, even when they post birthday parties or family beach days, it's not about pretending they're still a unit. It's about showing their children that love doesn't vanish just because the shape of it changed. You don't stop being a family, you become a different one. Some viewers keep digging, looking for tension behind every co-parenting moment, but not everything is a secret code. Sometimes two people grow apart, accept it, and decide to protect the kids instead of perform for the crowd. That's not hiding. That's healing. And no audience, no comment section, no thread online is entitled to a front row seat to that process. Because the people hurting most aren't the ones watching this unfold. They're the ones living inside it, adjusting to bedrooms with one parent at a time, navigating emotions too big for words. Still, public life doesn't shut down when a marriage does. Loren has a platform. Alexei still shows up, even if less visibly. They're both tethered to a franchise that hasn't stopped filming, hasn't stopped posting, hasn't stopped turning personal moments into public content. And now, the question isn't whether they're still together, it's what they'll each become on their own. Because love stories may end, but characters in a franchise rarely fade quietly. Especially when both of them still carry fan loyalty, brand power, and untold chapters waiting to be seen. It started as a whisper, then spread like a bruise. Loren and Alexei are separating. And what felt unthinkable in the beginning now reads like the only possible ending. But the fall didn't come from a single moment. It came from a quiet buildup, one surgery that revealed misalignment, one career that soared while the other slowed, a daily grind with 3 small children and no pause button, a franchise that demanded their story still serve a purpose, and a fan base watching for cracks the way people watch. Glass just before it shatters. It wasn't one decision. It was dozens. Spread across months. Muted. Unspoken. Until everything that had once felt effortless now felt staged. And this is where the illusion breaks. Love isn't always enough. Not when people change, roles shift, and the version of you that made sense at 25 no longer fits who you've become at 35. Not when your life is filmed, edited, and consumed by millions who think they know what your marriage should look like. Love can hold you through grief, through struggle, through parenthood, but it can't always keep pace with ambition, exhaustion, or emotional drift. That doesn't mean it was fake. It doesn't mean it failed. It means it lived. And like anything alive, it evolved. This wasn't the collapse of love, it was the quiet acceptance that its shape had changed. Because for all the disappointment, there's still tenderness in this story. Loren and Alexei didn't weaponize their split. They didn't play it for content. They kept the peace, showed up for the kids, and quietly reshaped what family looks like now. That takes more maturity than most breakups shown on television. It takes more trust than most marriages that stay together for show. But here's the question they leave behind. If this was the healthiest couple, the one who made it 10 years without public humiliation or betrayal, what does that say about the structure they were placed inside? What pressure are these people under that even the most grounded among them still collapse quietly under the weight of performance? And if Loren and Alexei reached their quiet breaking point, who's next? Because while fans grieve this ending, another long-term 90-day couple is starting to show the same signs. Mismatched goals, quiet avoidance, subtle distance behind the camera smiles. You've seen them. You've felt it. And in the next video, we're pulling back the curtain on a couple whose calm is starting to crack.